Alright guys, welcome back to week 8 of the final build project, and today we're going to be taking a slightly different approach. So I actually didn't film anything last weekend because I went ahead and painted some suspension stuff. So you can see the engine crossmember here is looking real nice and glossy black. Went ahead and painted this, some of the associated brackets and hardware. I didn't get the control arms painted because I got to melt out the old bushings because they're cracked and put in some polyurethane. So we're going to be working on that at some point in the future. But it is pretty, it's getting pretty cold on the weekends now. Today, I think there's like a high of 50 or so. It's probably about 45, 46 right now. So we really don't have any great painting weather left, which is unfortunate. So I think what I'm going to go ahead and do, what the plan is to go ahead and reassemble the suspension here, put it back in the car, and then roll it into the garage so that I can go ahead and get a nice controlled environment to paint it. So I'm going ahead and reassembling the front control arms and everything here. This is the steering rack that I got rebuilt. They moved this bushing down and then didn't paint around it, I guess. So there is a little bit of paint missing there, but other than that, we've got nice new seals and everything. I'm very happy with how it came out. I've heard from a lot of you that they actually don't have those rebuild or remanufacturing process kits anymore. So they must be out of parts for it, which is very unfortunate. I guess I got one of the last ones. So hopefully you guys can do it eventually. Hopefully they get more parts in stock. But regardless, I'm happy with mine. I'm glad that it is the way it is. The paint looks like it's flaking pretty easily off this, so I probably will go ahead and stick my own can of paint on there just because this is pretty annoying, all the paint flaking, but that doesn't really matter too much. I went ahead and upgraded to the solid Delrin steering rack bushings from Past Power. These ones you have to use, I believe it's the later style, at least this one right here. So these are two different bands. This one is a perfect C, and then this one, it kind of has like a hook on one end, kind of like that. So you can't interchange them, but this one, if you can tell, is too small for the groove that this goes into. So this one is actually the one that kind of keeps the rack from going to side. This one doesn't have anything here for like that. So if we left it like this, it would give us a lot of slop, and we really don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and either get to the correct bracket or get a different bushing for right here. We'll go ahead and see how that turns out. But it'll be fine for just moving it, 20 feet right now. So I'm going ahead and putting in these bolts. I don't know if I got the bolts, like mixed them up somehow or something, but the bolts that I had for these, see if I can show one right here. I don't know if you could tell, so the end is discolored, so that's usually a gold and now it's a silver. This means that it's changing the threads, like physically changing them, and if you look on one of these you can actually see where it's actually moving the thread. I believe this is an M10 by 1.25 thread in here, and I believe these bolts are M10 by 1.5 or something, and so they're really close and they're threading a little bit, and then they're actually changing the threads. So I don't know how that happened. I don't know at what point I got these bolts mixed up, but I went ahead and found some M10 by 1.25s just to kind of throw in here for the time being. I'm going to go ahead and get some new hardware anyways. Hopefully these threads aren't too damaged. It seems like they're in okay condition, so fingers crossed that's not too big of an issue. But other than that, I went ahead and got some new tie rod ends, so we're going to have to go put those on. Obviously this is going to need a full alignment once we're done here, but it'll be good enough for now. I'll go ahead and just kind of measure. You can see this end is in and this end is extended, so let's try to go ahead and get this kind of to the center. You just turn this with probably some vice grips or something, and we'll see if we can get that centered, and then put the tie rods on the ends, and just do a rough alignment just off the car, kind of keep them straight and see how that goes. But that's the plan, guys. I really hope that we can go ahead and get this done today, and then get all the sanding and painting done tomorrow. See if we can leave it in the garage for a day while it kind of hardens up, and hopefully it turns out really well. I'm really excited. It's coming along pretty good. I think I just picked the wrong time of year to do this for being outside. So let's go ahead. I'm going to assemble the rest of this, get the struts on and everything, and we'll see if we can go ahead and get it in the car. Alright guys, well, if you can see, we got the whole front suspension and subframe together, and it looks really, really cool. As always, we've got the green power tricks and the gold Swift springs, but now we've got some red polyurethane tie rod ends here, and then down there is a blue polyurethane, at least I think it's polyurethane. or silicone kind of rubber boot on that ball joint. But this control arm isn't painted yet, and all of this is just kind of held together. I haven't really torqued anything down all too much, because the plan is just to take this and roll the car, you know, like 50 feet back and then 50 feet forward up into the garage. So it doesn't have to be super crazy tight. So all this is pretty loose. We're going to have to take it apart and do the control arms anyways. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Tighten it all back up when we actually put it back together for final assembly. But regardless, it's looking really good. The black subframe, the paint on here, I don't know if you guys can see it too well with all the reflection, but it looks really, really nice. Obviously, there's like, you know, imperfections in it because it's a subframe, but you know, nobody's really going to see that too much. I'm just going to be able to wash this off and it's going to look great. The new steering rack looks great. You know, this whole assembly is just really, really good. So I went ahead and started putting tape on top of the strut towers and underneath the subframe mount right here because I didn't want to scuff up the new paint. And then I went ahead and actually started sanding. I got some more 600 grit, and the paint is coming off a lot better than it was last week. It's had a lot of time to dry, and I think that's really made the difference. It is sanding off like, you know, regular paint now, not just kind of gumming up and rolling into little tiny balls, paint balls. And what I've kind of figured out, I went ahead and sanded for, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour just now, and I think the rest of this weekend is actually just going to be me sanding all of this down. So there's a lot of places that are kind of like this. Hopefully you guys can see all that rough texture. But then there's a lot of places that are just like this as well, where you can just see a little bit through it. And I really want to get all of this down as smooth as possible. Places like these little ridges in here, deep in here, are really hard to get. And then of course this bucket, like look at how many little ridges this thing has. Sanding all this has been really, really difficult and time consuming, and that's kind of why I skimped on it when I did the primer. But since it's all coming out through the clear now, I don't want to spend any more time painting just to go ahead and sand it back off. So I think what I'm going to go ahead and focus on the rest of this weekend is sanding, getting all the little spots. There's just like little dust, I don't know if it's dust bits, but like this all over. So pretty much every single place has to be at least touched, but it doesn't really have to go down too deep. There's only a few places, like right here. It was pretty bad, but now it's actually really smooth, even though it looks pretty rough still. So I sanded that one down pretty good. When I'm sanding this, I'm trying my best to go ahead and do a circle motion as I go up and down, because when you go in one direction, it's going to go ahead and leave streaks, like you saw on the strut towers. So we really want to go ahead and do nice circles all along this, just to really give the best shine possible. I think if I can get most of this looking pretty good, I might go ahead with a little bit of a higher grit, like a 1000 or something, and put some water on it and just try to wet sand it as well, just to make it really, really polishy smooth. But I might also just hold off on that until I get the next layer of color down. But regardless, I'm going to go ahead and probably pull off all this tape just so I can sand it better. But we're probably going to go ahead and move this next weekend. So I think this weekend is just going to be a lot of sanding. So we're going to skip till tomorrow, and whatever I got done tomorrow, I'll go ahead and update you guys on. This isn't going to be too long of a video, just because I think there's going to be a lot of prep work to finish this painting. I'm really, really looking forward to getting it done, but it is taking so much longer than I initially planned. And I think if I were to do this again, I would just have somebody else do it, because it is taking a while. But guys, I appreciate you sticking in here. Let's go ahead and jump to tomorrow and see what's going on. Alright guys, it is the next day and I've been sanding for, I don't know, about 45 minutes or so. And, you know, I kept having issues with my sandpaper. If you can see all the little dots, those are just like paint balls basically. They just kind of roll up and stick, and it just makes it a little less effective. And if you leave it too long, you can actually get like the paint to stick back onto the original paint, and it just leaves like a weird texture and everything. And you know, I was like, oh, I don't want to have to go through a bunch of sandpaper to do this. And I was like, well, let me go ahead and just try wet sanding real quick. So I went ahead, grabbed a spray bottle like this, and just another sheet, and I started going on this side, and let me tell you, the difference that wet sanding makes is incredible. You know, I've actually never wet sanded anything before, so I didn't, you know, I knew the concept of it. Basically, the water helps to remove the particles from the sandpaper so it doesn't get gummed up. But just like the general ease of use is so much better. It is basically what would take me, you know, like 5 minutes with regular sandpaper, it's taking me 30 seconds with wet sanding. And the reason is because the sandpaper is just so much more effective. So it may look, I don't know if you guys can see it on camera, it may look kind of dirty right now. That's because there's a lot of like water and paint dust kind of mixed up in here. But I did this whole section right here in about like 2 minutes, and you know, it is really nice and smooth now. Like before I could really feel the texture. I still haven't done up here yet. So I'll go ahead and show you like the texture when it's done. But it is actually really nice and smooth, and it is almost effortless now. It is a lot easier to do. I'm super happy. I should have done this from the start because it would have saved me a lot of time. But the one thing that, of course, I noticed is since it's going so much faster, you can really burn through places really quickly. So I've been pretty careful watching just how kind of dark I get, which means I'm getting into the primer, so I don't go too far. But this section that was really textured before, it is really nice and smooth. Of course, around like these spot welds here, there's still a lot of texture. I guess if I wanted to get rid of that, I would put like body filler in it, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm just going to leave it and then probably put a heavy coat of paint on just to try to smooth it out as much as possible. But it's coming out really, really good. I'm being careful not to burn through it. Corners like this are kind of easy to burn through. I was trying to get this edge right here, and you know, I'm burning through this top part right there. This isn't too bad because the fender actually covers this, so I really don't care because, you know, it bolts in right here. So this is actually not even seen, but I'll know, and I want to make sure it's as good as I can make it. But this is just a quick update, guys. Wet sanding, if you are going to be taking on a project and you have a large area that you need to sand down really nice and flat, I highly recommend wet sanding. I'm going to do a bit more research into it and see if you can do it on primer, because I've heard that primer absorbs moisture. I'm not sure if that's true or not. But you might not want to use it for primer, but at least for color coat like this, you know, I was already going to go ahead and wet sand it once I had a nice good coat to get it really shiny. But I think putting this down and then spraying a nice good coat is going to make it a lot easier. I'm probably not going to have to wet sand it again, or I'm just going to have to do a few areas. And the areas that I'm really focusing on are up here, of course, along the front there. Anywhere that's really super visible, down along the sides, along the frame rails, I don't really care too much about. But this is just going to make it so much faster. You know, it's going to take all day down to a, you know, an hour or two job. So it's going to make my life a lot easier. So I'm super happy with it. It is fairly decently warm today, and I was thinking about putting a coat of paint down, but it is also pretty windy, and I don't expect the wind to go away, and it is that time where the tree drops all of its leaves, so there's just a bunch of leaves on the ground, so I don't want to get too much dust in here. But I think this is looking really, really good. I think in any sections where I might have accidentally burned through to the metal, like right there, I might go ahead and just spray with a single coat, just to make sure that it doesn't rust over the next week. And then next weekend, guys, we're going to be ready to paint this thing. I'm so looking forward to it. It is coming out really, really good. I'm really happy with how the wet sanding is making it look and feel. So this is really awesome. I'm going to go ahead and keep sanding this, and we'll see what we get to today. Alright guys, so I went ahead and spent the last 25 or 30 minutes wet sanding the top part here, all the super visible stuff, and it is coming out really, really well. So I want to go ahead and show you. You might be able to see the marks in here now. Those are just sanding marks, so it's not like super deep gouges. You can't even feel it with my fingers. So it is looking really, really good. I'm super happy with how it came out. I'm going ahead and letting it dry for just a minute because, you know, there's water and dust and slurry all over. But I'm going to go ahead and feel it up because there are some spots, like right there, if you can see, that I didn't even know that these existed, little rough spots, and just through wet sanding, I was like, oh look, there's actually some rough spots along here, all along here that, you know, you could kind of see, but you really had to feel it to know. So I'm going to go ahead and let that dry up. But overall, it is looking really good. There are a few trouble areas like the headlight buckets still. These are just really difficult to spray paint into, just from the direction of the can and everything. So they don't get a lot of coverage. They get a lot of kind of like dust buildup from the rest of the paint, and it's not super smooth. And that's okay because, you know, nobody's actually going to see this once the car is done. But I want to make it as best as I can. So these areas need a lot of work. And then also like back in there needs a lot of work as well. But overall, it is coming out really, really good. I think probably the beginning of the video I was sounding a little bit down because of it just wasn't coming out the way I wanted it to. But now with all of this wet sanding, it is actually looking really, really good, and I'm super excited for it. I think that's going to be it for this video, guys, but I guarantee you next week, or at least the next video that you see, we are going to be putting another layer of color on here, and then the clear coat, and it is going to be incredible. I am super duper excited for it. I wasn't very happy with how it was coming out before, and I didn't want to do a bad job because this is, you know, my baby that I've been working on for years now. But it is finally looking exactly how I want it, and next week we're just going to go ahead and finish that off, and I'm super excited, guys. So, as always, if you have any questions or comments, definitely drop them down below. If you have any painting tips, like I said last week, you know, these videos are 2 or 3 weeks ahead, or behind for me, so I probably won't, you know, benefit from them. But as always, if anybody else is looking at this, they can benefit from this. So drop a comment down below if you have any better suggestions. And as always, guys, I hope you have a great week, and I will see you guys next week.